It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing Asunder by Kirsten Hall as part of our pre-Nebula prep arc, mini-arc thing. Alexis, would you like to give the plot of this book?
I will try. So Karis is what's called a death speaker, which is somebody who has sold her soul to the new gods who came and deposed the old gods. And what this means is that she's got some useful magical powers, but someday her awful god is going to come and drag her off to new god hell. So she's got a job, and in the process of this, she discovers some horrible monsters and is mutually rescued by a dying man. And to save him, because he promises a massive reward, to save him, she spirit binds him so that now she's got a dude in her head, a classic Wizard versus Lesbians trope. And then she goes on a lot of adventures because it turns out you're really not supposed to do that, but she really wants her giant reward. And in the meantime, she hooks up with her ex-girlfriend and a cute academic who thinks that she's just fascinating.
Yes, although I should say that we mean hook up in a strictly platonic sense.
Hook up is in join up with. Yes, this is Wizards versus bisexuals, and there are lesbians. They're absolutely wizards, and there are lesbians, but the central romance, as you can probably guess just from the synopsis, is straight.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you can guess that from the synopsis.
That's true, because it's not like, it's not like Charis and Jadao were ever an item, so.
Right. Within the context of their podcast, we would assume that our possessor here is a much more problematic figure than, in fact, he turns out to be.
Yes, I think we described this book to each other as what is asking the question, what happens if the wizard inside your head is also the token good man?
That is precisely what this book dares to ask. And I imagine that a lot of our discussion will be centered around the consequences of that. But yes, as you say, there are wizards. This is a sort of a magical steampunk world because of the gods. There's pretty much any kind of tech that you want.
I'd call it it's a little more interesting than steampunk, I think, but...
Yeah. No, I mean, that's just about the level of technology that we're dealing with here.
There are trains, but they are magical transdimensional spider trains, so,
Yes. And as far as why you should read this book,
I found it a pretty good read. I thought, it's got some good moments. It's got some great visuals, and it moves along at a reasonable clip, and it's got some good, exciting moments. Overall, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think the number one reason to read this book is that it's just good. It's a good adventure yarn.
It's just like a classic fantasy novel. It's what you want out of a classic fantasy novel. There's an adventure, there's some characters, there's a cool world, there's like an appropriate amount of creepy stuff. There's just a good old-fashioned fun time.
Yeah, some of the visuals and the sort of the world-building ideas, like the giant multi-dimensional spider plane / yacht is, are new and novel and fun. But more than anything else, pacing. This book knows how pacing works.
It's really well paced.
We go from one interesting, thing to another. And even when you think, okay, why are we spending so much time over here? You already have been set up by the book to go, oh no, we're going somewhere with this. And there's no wasted momentum.
There's nicely, slowly escalating tension, as they get closer and closer to their destination, various things get more tense and dire. It doesn't have that 2/3 of the way slump that a lot of books have.
despite being like good sized as a book. Also, I think that given that it's on the longer side, it's remarkable how well it keeps up that escalating tension for the entire ride.
I feel like I can award this book the extremely high compliment that it feels shorter than it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, that I feel like if you like fantasy, that ought to sell you. It's a good fantasy book.
It is a good fantasy book.
At no point do you stop and like ask yourself whether what just happened made sense. There was like one thing in the entire book that made me think that, and that's minuscule given the size of the narrative.
It really for me, it really recaptured the feeling of reading a fantasy book when I was in high school and had way lower standards, and like, you know, it just sort of that sort of excitement and enjoyment.
Exactly, just sort of the feeling of being in the hands of a good, competent author like a Terry Pratchett, who I'm sure is going to lead me to the next cool thing that is going to happen right now.
Yes. And I have to say, I really disliked the other novel that I've read by this author, which was called Star Eater. So, this is... she's clearly getting better. And
or at least more Alexis Word. But I'm sure that, yes.
Yes. Or she's just getting better at appealing to me. But really, isn't that the same thing? I have very good taste in books.
There you go. We're allowed to say it. After 110 episodes or whatever this is, we're allowed to say it. Can you tell we're a little loopy for this one, folks?
Yeah, we're recording this one on a weekday.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so Isaac, do you have anything else to add for why you should read this book?
No, but I have something to add for why you shouldn't read this book, which is that the ending is a sequel hook.
The ending is absolutely a sequel hook. I do have something of a defense of the ending for post-spoiler zone.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but that is certainly the thing about the book that is the least satisfying. It gives you the old Stuart Little ending, in fact, which I've mentioned on the podcast before, but I'll get more into what I mean by that.
The ending is a sequel hook, but not in the way that leads you to be completely confident that there's going to be a sequel.
Exactly.
I'm going to be real annoyed if there's not a sequel. But yes. Also, we can get into the content warnings.
Yeah, but really, other than that, I can't think of a reason not to read this one if you're an SFF fan. It's just good. It's just solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but in terms of content warnings, we have some classic Wizards versus Lesbians terrible parents.
Oh yeah, we've got terrible parents in both the literal parent and the like metaphorical parent.
Yes, there is the threat of whatever Sebaster is going to do to her is a trigger warning in and of itself.
Right. There's some like there's multiple incidences of threatened or real like non-consensual. Only slightly metaphorical pregnancy.
Yes, there isn't any sex in this book, but there's a lot of metaphorical rape. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and it is the kind of it's not a stretch. Like it's really obviously metaphorical rape, threatened and happening. Body horror galore.
Mm-hmm.
Non-consensual drugging, torture and mutilation.
Yeah, the nasty characters in this book are thoroughly nasty, I would say. But we are in one of our default bisexual settings, so you don't have homophobia to deal with, although you do have racism.
Yep.
And sexism.
Yes, and sexism.
This is not one of our default bisexual societies where people aren't sexist. This is one of our default bisexual societies where people are sexist, which I actually prefer. I think it works better.
Well, and honestly, the thing is, this isn't necessarily a default bisexual society at the upper levels, because we actually don't see much of the upper levels. And what we do, all those pairings are heterosexual. What we see is that, but Karis is part of the sort of lower middle class, and / lower class, and those people appear to be. This is definitely a society where a girl can ask another girl out for a drink and not have it be, and like no one's gonna freak out.
Yes, And I would say the first character we see do that is certainly not in a lower class milieu.
No, but she's also not part of the hereditary nobility.
Correct. The hereditary nobility may work differently.
Or the hereditary, like, upper class in general. So we don't... so, you know, honestly, it's a little bit like things are in the more liberal parts of the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so. It's a very magical setting, but it does sort of boil down to being quite similar to the world we currently live in a lot of ways. But having said that, have we in our delirium, have we forgotten any part of our podcast, or can we just head on to the spoiler zone?
I think we can just head on to the spoiler zone.
Sweet. There's a suicide in this book, and we forgot all about it, so here is a warning for that. But we're going on to the spoiler zone anyway. So, I did a little clap for an edit point there, which I shouldn't do because I'm going to have to edit that out. Were you reminded at all of Master of Jinn by the magic/god system in this book?
Not as much as you'd think. Honestly, I'm reminded of a Tanya Huff book that I read years and years ago, where a woman had a dude in her head. That I read like in high school.
It was called No Quarter. And it was the third in a series of elemental magic books. And it was about an assassin who had a quasi-incestuous relationship with her brother. And that brother had been stuck in her head in the previous book. But in this book, the guy who was possessing her brother's body in book 2 is now in her head because she felt sorry for him. Clearly, I don't have the opportunity to be reminded of that.
This was also a bisexual... This was, you know, another story about a bisexual woman having adventures with a dude in her head. But they're not that similar overall. It's just that was really what brought it back to me.
Mm-hmm. I was reminded because of the new gods in this world are called Jinni. The reason I made that mistake will become clear presently. The idea that the old indigenous gods are being replaced by these sort of clockwork angels in the same way that it was happening in Magic of Jinn and Master of Jinn, although really without the moral valence that Master of Jinn put on it.
Actually, that's one thing I really like about this book is that
exactly
you've got, because at first you're like, okay, the new gods are deeply creepy and awful, and you see them, you know, torturing the bodies of the old gods, and you see the ways in which the people who worship the old gods, you know, really are feeling, you know, dispossessed and still sort of sadly clinging on to their old gods. And you see how, like, the new gods are really awful, and their saints and their adherents are really awful. And then you meet one of the old gods, and it turns out she's just as bad or worse.
Yes, I love it.
Me too.
No, this book is very much no gods, no masters. Thank you very much, and no parents also.
Right.
Which I think is a sentiment that both of us can get behind.
Yes, that we only have dads really, and well, no, actually, what's his face's mom is.
Yes, we do have the mentally ill mom, although she got it from... Well, actually, that's really... that's a fun little sort of thing in and of itself. Is like mentally ill mom there got it from generational trauma of being, like, essentially kidnapped. Her, you know, great grandmother was, you know, kidnapped and forcibly impregnated by one of the old gods, which...
Oh, well, was... kidnapped by one of the old gods, and it is not entirely resolved whether she was forcibly impregnated by the old god or by his priests later after, you know, he returned her to the humans.
Yes. However you want to tell the story, it has left a stain of madness, particularly in the women of the family, which feels like a very sort of hearty and easy to use metaphor about
right.
About sort of the generational consequences of being used ritually in this way as women, and in fact having our guy here, his
Thorane.
name is Thorane. our guy here, he's such a he's
He's
such
such
a
a
guy.
guy.
Ferran is just this guy, you know. Like, but it's
But he's
clear
a
that
good guy. Like
he's a good guy, you
like
know.
even though I was like, oh, this is going to be a straight romance, and she's she's going to end up with the guy inside her head instead of the cute academic girl. But that's fine. The cute academic girl can hook up with Karis's ex instead.
Right.
But like, no, he's trying. He's trying so hard.
Well, it's like he is. So this book does not commit to the sin of every character doing therapy speak.
No.
But he does therapy speak.
Which is great because Karis absolutely refuses to ever speak about her emotions to anyone. So it actually makes for a fun contrast.
Yes, and also it makes sense in the universe that he would, because he's a professional diplomat and an upper class kid who has had to deal with, his parent situation for his whole life.
Right, and the son of like an abusive fanatic dad, and like cold withholding abusive fanatic dad and suicidal mom. So
right, so he could either be a complete basket case or he could have learned to work on his feelings, and luckily for Karis, he's the latter.
You kind of get the impression that his ex-girlfriend trained him.
Has a lot to do with this.
Yes.
I love her too. What a great character.
Alicia, she's great.
Yes. She's like, I'm not thrilled that he has decided to go to North Korea with you, but,
But, I mean, I did dump him, and I accept that at this point this means that I can't really, like, dictate the rest of his life for him.
Yes, they're two grown-ups, and Karis is very much not a grown-up. Karis is a drowned rat,
Yes.
Karis is a gremlin that was found on the street.
She is scrungly.
Isn't she scrungly? Isn't she one wet cat? She's very scrungly. We have a fine line of scrungly heroes. It's almost strange that she isn't a lesbian, given what podcast this is. But
yes, but again, she's bisexual.
She is, yes. To the extent that she is sexual at all, of course, because she is one of those characters who has been spending the entirety of her life energy trying to erase her abusive past, and
fleeing from one like abusive exploitive situation to another.
One conservatorship of essentially into another.
Like
yes.
she runs away from her horrible abusive dad, spends a year starving to death, and then makes a pact with this horrible abusive god who's who fawns over her and coos over her and she knows is going to eat her soul at some point at some unspecified point in the future. So nobody really wants to, so she doesn't want to get emotionally close to anybody, and she assumes no one else wants to get close to her. And then in the process of this, she finds out that in fact her awful god is grooming her to be
the mother of
the mother
Ginny.
of future. They're not called Ginny. They're called Ephurite.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have made that completely up.
Yes.
Because again, this is 2 books ago. So Ephurite is what they
Ephurite.
are called.
Oh, that's how you. Oh, okay. I read it as Ephurite, but if it's pronounced Ephurite, I can see how you got to Ginny from there. From the.
Yes. Okay. This all makes sense. You can see where I'm making the connection.
Absolutely. No, it totally makes sense, but it's spelled Ephirite.
Which sounds more like Ephraim, kind of, angelic, which again,
yes.
vibes with the Master of Jin connection. But
still, this one didn't remind me of Master of Jin because it is such a second world fantasy.
Yeah, no, this is not taking place in fantasy, this world, the way that Master of Jin was.
Well, Master of Jin is very much taking place in this world, but with magic. This isn't even taking place in lightly fantasized. None of these are obvious one-to-one analogs.
Correct. No, it's strictly the theological setup that reminded me of the book, and actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about was what does this serve? I guess because I always I'm always hesitant about narratives that make the powers that be literal gods, because I feel that it gives too much credit to the leaders of the world, and but I suppose that it makes sense to think of them as personified ideologies in this one.
Right. They're very much personified. And they're not even necessarily ideologies per se, because it's almost, honestly, it's the replacement of sort of local allegiances where every town has their own little god to a more sort of, it's the transition to nationalism almost.
You're absolutely right. It's one wants to map it onto the sort of the development of religion in our world and think, okay, so this is like native gods versus, creeping, imperialist monotheism, but that's not really the story that's being told here. It is, as you say, more like the consolidation of like hyper local political awareness into sort of like nationalism, or this is kind of proto-imperialist.
Well, so I mean, the thing is that this, Karis's country was a colony of Thurine's country until 30, 40 years ago, and that imperialist order was overturned. I mean, politically, this is more like the transition to the post-World War II order, where we're moving from from an imperialism that is rooted in, families and lineages and countries to more of an imperialism, to more of like a Cold War-esque imperialism rooted in ideologies that, are backed by nations, but aren't themselves intrinsically linked to a given nation.
So that does go back to what I was saying about these being sort of personified ideological forces.
Yes, no, I think they are, but I think that they're more like politically ideological as opposed to, say, religiously ideological.
Yeah, no, that's what I was trying to get at too. I think that I think that the reason that the Ephraiti are the Ephrites,
sure,
the new angels. I'm just going to call them that for the sake of my flabby brain.
Uh-huh.
The reason that they are like that they're all about math and algorithms
and contracts
is that they are meant to indicate sort of the new devised orders that are usurping ethno-nationalism and sort of blood and soil type stuff, but are equally nasty
right,
in their consequences and potentially far worse just because of how far-reaching they are.
Right, and then you get to see, there's this, so, obviously it makes sense that there's this nostalgia for the old days, but then you see the old days, and actually the old days are also awful, because they, it turns out that you had petty tyrants instead of imperial tyrants, or sometimes you had imperial tyrants, but, they were grounding their claims more in race and bloodline.
Yeah. And I also enjoyed the bit where it's like, oh, these new ideologies can't reproduce themselves without partaking of the flesh of those old ideologies. They have to inveigle the ritual or that sort of the cult and culture and sacrifice stuff into themselves, or else they are not they're not real gods. They can't really reproduce without it, which is a pattern that we have seen. It's like this is why. If you want to go to the rationalist church, you will be singing hymns there, even if they're not about any specific gods.
Right. So and it's kind of left ambiguous whether or not that would ever actually work.
No, they don't seem to have pulled it off, and it is a question of whether they would ever have been able to pull it off, even without the shenanigans that ensue.
So I actually do want to talk briefly about the ending, because when I was rereading this book for the podcast, I had a realization. Yes, the ending is somewhat unsatisfying, but because it's setting you up for a sequel that may or may not ever happen. But
I just want to say that I don't actually think it's unsatisfying.
No, it's not unsatisfying. It was disappointing. I was like, what? No, yeah.
But go ahead.
No, part of why it's not actually that unsatisfying is that the book actually it answers the question that it raised at the beginning, which is Karis going to be able to escape her compact, and if so, how? And it answers that. Like, it takes the whole book, and the answer involves shenanigans, but that's fine. You're like, that is the thing that has been driving her all book, and every new thing that you find out about her really is really about either explaining why she signed this horrible compact in the first place, or why, or all the things that she is doing, the way that she has centered now her entire life around trying to escape it. And so the end of the book resolves that. She gets out of it. Unfortunately, at this point, the arc of the book has also set up all of these other things that she now wants, because as it becomes possible for her to achieve her dream, she starts to develop the capability of wanting other things like friends and possibly romance. And that all gets yanked away from her as part of her achieving her goal. So it actually works quite well.
She starts individuating, darn it,
She does!
Despite her best efforts.
So in terms of construction, I think it's quite well done. The problem is that because this book is, up until then, very well paced, it has this feeling of you're just sort of, you're running faster and faster and faster, and you're really going at a good clip, and then you just, like, slam into a wall.
Absolutely.
Particularly if you're reading the ebook and you're not paying attention to what percentage it says you have left. Like, if it were a physical book, I would at least have the sense of, okay, no, they're not going to be able to resolve all of this, are they? But with the ebook, it was just bam.
Yeah, I think that I do think that it works. I mean, it also, like, I like a classic Stuart Little ending, which is what I call it when the whole, the hero suddenly loses their love interest at the very last minute and has to set out on a quest to find them, and that's the end of the book.
Yes.
Which caused me, I've told the story on the podcast before, but which caused me to demand that my father write a more satisfying ending, thus making it my first act of fan fiction, albeit by proxy. But I think that it's a classic for a reason. In addition to, if we're favored with another book in the series, it definitely gives us what we are meant to expect from that. But I think that also it just makes sense given the rules of the world that we've learned. Like, her entire life is basically trying to wiggle her way out of this agreement that she has with Sebaster. And in the way that it works with, like, these sort of legalistic totalizing systems that the Efreet represent, you're looking for loopholes. You're looking for little places that the power can't reach. I'm going to move to Canada, etc. As if that would ever work. And you are looking for, places that the power can't see that you can sort of squat and live in. And it does end up being that way, although not in the way that she wants. She ends up trading something, which you always have to do to get to this safe place. But she does indeed get to the safe place, as I'm going to say twice.
Well,
there's both a space and a place.
Though somewhat crucially, she's not willing to make the trade. I mean, part of her character growth is that she's done all, she abandoned her best friend and her brother to their tiny town and awful goddess and abusive father, because she needed to get away, and it was a reasonable decision. But
yes, this book is very good about survivor's guilt.
Right. And, it was a reasonable decision, but also it's reasonable for her brother and best friend to be mad about this, and for there to have been consequences. Her brother gets murdered because she doesn't bring him with. And, it's, and then she signs this compact. Now she's trying to get out of the compact. And again, totally reasonable. You don't want her to be, you don't want to be like, no, Karis, the honorable thing is to let the god forcibly impregnate you and possibly also eat your soul. But still, she's survived by basically refusing to make any other obligations. She works for the gang lord, but she refuses to be. She insists that she's only ever a contractor for the gang lord. She's never going to be a W-2 employee, because this is a crucial distinction. She's one of the very
no gods,
few.
no masters.
Right. She's one of the very few people. Well, she has a god and a master. She's one of the very few people to have signed this compact and not join the cult of compact signers, which also means that they hate her. And so basically, she's always either refusing to commit or trying to get out of her commitments. And in every case, it makes sense. And then she ends up then when finally given the chance, when somebody's like, no, actually, I will take on your commitment and free you of this one thing that you committed to voluntarily to help somebody else. And she's real mad about it.
Yeah.
Partly because she loves the guy, but also partly, I think, because she genuinely is just not emotionally capable of owing anyone anything.
I love that. I love how. Well, let's talk about her and thus their relationship. Because what happens during this book is that a grown ass man, who has fully individuated and knows what he wants out of his life, is trapped in the crazy brain of a woman with a crazy brain.
Yes.
It reminds me of the panel from Taishi's Diary comic where she is spinning out about her anxieties, and her husband just grabs her and is like, "Stop your crazy brain! Stop it!"
Right. Except the guy is inside her brain.
Yes, he has no respite from the crazy brain except while she's sleeping, at which time he just has to sit there and watch her sleep. And
he is her shadow, so he can occasionally carefully peek under the door and things like that. But
yes, he manifests as her shadow. The jingle that I'm going to try to do for this is Lemon Demon's Soft Fuzzy Man. What you girls really need is a soft fuzzy man.
He is a soft fuzzy man.
Which is going to be very difficult. So in case I don't manage it, I'm just going to mention it here. But can't you see me? Why can't you see me? I'm all around, all cold and dreamy. What you girls really need is a soft fuzzy man, a wisp of smoke man to waft over you and cloud up your view. So show me your hands and wave them right through, a soft fuzzy man. There you go. But what happens as a result is he's basically reacting as a normal, decent man from the upper class does when he is in a relationship with because they are in a relationship, even if it's not a romantic one from day one, because he's literally stuck with her.
Yes.
When he is in a relationship with a crazy traumatized woman, which is
a crazy traumatized lower class woman from the country that was very recently his country's colony. That every power dynamic is in his favor except for the fact that he's stuck in her brain.
I love it so much. It's
there's just this book is really smart and interesting and complicated about power dynamics and the way that they're never straightforward.
Yeah, and the thing is that he proceeds to do what one would do in this situation, which is to attempt to help her with her crazy brain. And the way that he does this is by ever so gently and with mostly patiently, although of course given his impossible situation, not always patiently, pushing at her boundaries, trying to get her to do things that she's not comfortable with, trying to get her to accept ideas that she's not comfortable with, trying to get her to trust people that she should trust but can't trust.
And by pushing at her boundaries, mostly this is sort of pushing at her emotional walls. As he's when it comes to her boundaries around physical intimacy, he's incredibly respectful.
Yes, no, he's almost cartoonishly respectful of like stretching as far away from her as he can whenever she takes off her shirt. But he's still very much, prodding her and poking her and being like, no, you need to do this. You need to practice self-care right now. Do it, do it, do it, do it.
No, Karis, you can express an emotion. I'm going to like keep prodding you until you express an emotion, even if that emotion is anger.
I'm going to share things about you with the people around you, even if you don't want me to.
And I'm going to keep sharing my emotions with you, even though you don't want me to.
Yes. And the thing that strikes me is that with like a tiny, and one of the great tensions of this book is you don't know how it's going to land, but like a tiny like 0.1 degree shift in this, he's an evil wizard.
Yes, because this is absolutely what Jadao does.
Yes.
This is absolutely what Jadao does, except Jadao is doing it with a goal. Jadao's goal is to convince Cheris to throw off her empire and join his revolution, and he's going to psychologically break her to do it. And Farine really just wants Karis to, be in a better situation. And also to get out of her brain. He definitely wants to get out of her brain.
It's like partially because of the podcast that we do, but like everything says, no, your paranoia about him is well-founded, and he is in fact manipulating you for sinister purposes, which she keeps coming back to every time that there's a setback.
And it is reasonable. I think this book also does a very good job of making it clear that Karis's fears about this are absolutely reasonable, both for the kind of person that she is, but also for the situation.
Yes. I'm just really, it's really interesting, or maybe interesting is the wrong word, but it's like daring to know that he is actually a good man. It is possible for there to be a good man in this situation, and sometimes what you need is a good man.
Yeah, though, again, one of the things I like is that he's not 100% always a good man. Because with Karis, he is a good man. Partly because he's in love with her, and partly because, his survival depends on her. But with her, and in her defense, he's a good man. But, for example, he uses all of those skills to emotionally manipulate our sweet academic girl into violating all of her personally held beliefs and boundaries, and to, commit one of the many metaphorical rapes in this book, specifically to rescue Karis. And she never really recovers from that over the course of the book. Partly because she doesn't have time, but also because, it's actually a huge violation that, she has suffered she has been traumatized and has also suffered moral injury. Entirely because of Farine's manipulation.
And so we rephrase the question, like maybe what the book is saying is not there could be a good man. Maybe what the book is saying is there could be a manipulative, wizardly man who pushes your boundaries and also pushes the boundaries of people around you, who is what you need.
Yes, I think basically the same skills that can make somebody a really caring friend or lover or a good therapist are also the same skills that can make somebody the person who completely destroys you and your position in your social circle and all of your relationships. And so they're skills, and the skills themselves are actually morally neutral. It's entirely about how you use them. And sometimes you do have that person in your life who has those skills and actually uses them for good. And sometimes they use them for good with you and not so good with other people.
Absolutely. I think that my boyfriend is wonderful to me, but seems to be awful to everybody I know is a trope that exists even outside the confines of the isolating abuser. Sometimes it's just, oh, he's an asshole who is nice to me because he loves me.
Yes, and Farine is better than that, but
Yes, but he's certainly willing to he's willing to put her friends through hard times on her behalf.
Yeah, well, and there's the two people who we see him be thoroughly, completely decent to consistently are Karis and his ex. So,
yes, people who he either has fucked or wants to.
Yes.
Actually, speaking of kind of boundary violating, I'm not sure in his position that I would have gone for the shadow makeouts at that particular moment in time. But,
right.
But
yeah, I mean,
he did stop.
Well, I think
there's the decent part.
He did stop, and I feel like I think that he was expecting to not survive. I think because he was really pushing to get out of this, and he's expecting to not survive. So I guess he's like, fuck it, I'm going to shoot my shot.
Mm-hmm. I also just enjoyed that scene. That was like some cool erotic imaginings in a book that doesn't have any like real sex in it.
Yeah,
and I think it worked. But yeah, no, it is sort of an interesting, it is, this book does not feel ideologically bound, which I guess, gels with the whole, like, we're rejecting father figures and religious figures left and right.
Right.
It's like, sometimes the good thing is the person who is there when you need him, Yes,
this is very much a don't trust power, trust the bonds that you make with the people around you.
Which is my personal ideology, basically. So,
and I think in this particular political moment, like geopolitical moment in time, it's an extremely appealing one.
Yes.
And especially because the book isn't saying power is always evil. The book is saying power shouldn't be trusted. You're still going to have to make deals.
Power is useful. She pits all of the powerful entities in her life against each other, basically, and that is how she survives.
Well,
is by using.
Farain pits them.
Farain does,
right?
Yeah. But she and Farain as a unit, that is how they end up surviving all of this. Is by, by making all of the people around them who are actually puissant to a certain degree are played off against each other.
Yes. No, it's great, because they do this at both the absolute top level where it's pitting, the new gods and the old gods, but also at the lower level where it's the local cult and the local gang lord.
Or like, here is the construct and here is her dad.
Right.
And
also,
let's cancel these two problems out, shall we? And her brother at the same time. Right. That scene is like that. So many birds with one stone in that particular sequence.
Yes. Or here's or like Farain's awful dad and again, well, Farain's awful dad is really taken down by her friends. So
yes, but he's also like not one of the scary ones. He's a toothless. He is not the powerful one. He is the.
I mean, he does almost kill her, but
yes, but he does that via the medium of allying with another powerful entity in order to do it, because he is the kind of like toothless pants-wetting fascist who gets the gendarme to do his work for him.
He's a great depiction of a toothless pants-wetting fascist. And you know what? He's very it is foreshadowed. He's going to be like that. You show up and you're like, yep, that's exactly what he was like. Farain was not lying about his dad.
This book could be like, we're off to see the wonderful wizard of dad. We're going to this dad,
this horrible dad,
kill that horrible dad, go to that horrible dad. I don't think that we end up killing that horrible dad, but we certainly mess his life up.
Yeah, who knows? So what'd you think of the skin thieves? Speaking of, because this is like, don't trust power. Don't trust your local power. That's your organized crime. Don't trust your local power. That's your religion. Don't trust the big political entities. Don't trust ideology. Also, don't trust rich people who are randomly being nice to you.
Worry about the compound.
Yes. Anyone who's trying to isolate you for any reason.
Yes, there's probably a good reason for this. Yeah, I know. I thought that was like, I mean, on the one hand, it was just like an episode, and it was probably the episode that had the least to do with the plot up until that point. Although, since there's like tendrils put forward that they may show up again in a putative sequel, but
Yeah, but also it's really crucial because this is where you get to see Farain do something where he's not being a good guy.
yes, it's very important for the character development, if not for like the overall, development of the main thrust of the narrative.
It derails like their quest, but it has a lot of good character advancement. So
I love that, like,
also it's just nicely creepy.
I mean, might as well call them vampires. They're just vampires. I love that the vampires, like, that the vampire who captures them's whole evil deal is that he's losing face in his community.
Yes.
And he really wants to bring in a coup, like this hot new skin thief that everybody is hearing about, who managed to, catch a ride on this woman. If I get him into our social circle, that'll give me points for the next, 700 years or however long, until the new sensation comes along. Yeah, no, I love, and I love the depiction of like the older, like the old racist vampire woman who
Yes.
we think is picking the academic for sex, but in fact is picking the academic to be her new body. But that's, I mean, speaking of another Wizards versus Lesbians classic, The Awful Dinner Party.
Yes.
Whew, that was a good one.
That was a good awful dinner party.
And yet, like, being stuck with like a inconceivably old, rich, powerful, and academically well-connected woman who is going to demolish you for her own entertainment, because you're young and she's bored, is a vibe.
Yeah.
Maybe we've all been there. I don't know if we've all been there. I've been there.
And I also enjoy this sort of escalating tension of, okay, maybe this guy's just kind of weird. Oh no, this guy's definitely trying to isolate us on his compound, but maybe he's just kind of a creep. Oh no, there's something really wrong going on here. I think these guys might be cannibals. Oh no, wait, they're vampires. They're body stealing vampires.
Actually, that's one of my favorite things about that is Farain being like, I think they're cannibals. And like, he's joking.
And everyone else is like, actually.
It's like, well,
Maybe.
kind of rolling their eyes about it. It's like, that felt very much like comrades in arms who've been through a bunch of like horrible shit. And they're like, well, we got to be philosophical about what this new kind of horrible
Right,
shit that
exactly.
we're in is.
And then they find out and they're like, oh, we kind of prefer the cannibals, honestly.
Yes. I think that my favorite of the little interludes, the sort of plotlets, was the going back to Karis's home village one. In part because I just really liked the brother poltergeist.
The brother poltergeist. Also, I loved because Farain, this is a good example of Farain being, fallible, and it tells you so much about his own relationship with his dad, where he spends this time going, Karis, I don't understand why you're being so weird about your dad. Like, he loves you. He's welcoming you. My dad would never do this. And then slowly him going, oh, he only ever talks about himself. I'm beginning to see maybe your dad's, just differently bad. And then, her dad hits her and he's like, oh, shit, never mind. Your dad is even worse than my dad. It is both a good character moment for him, showing him because he's generally the most emotionally intelligent person in the book. So watching him make a totally understandable mistake, and then realize what he's doing wrong, I thought worked really well.
Yeah. I mean, I also just I like a big, heavy-handed metaphor sometimes, particularly in a book that's as complicated and subtle as this one is.
Yeah.
Just like, the thousand eyes boring into Karis and being like, you killed me by leaving, even though it was your only option. I mean,
yeah,
great. No one's going to miss that. like
Yep.
big red letters, and I think that
Big red letters, while at the same time you have her ex-girlfriend being like, I'm not speaking to you because you left me, even though it was your only option. And then going, no, wait, you were supposed to stay with me. You were just supposed to, I was just going to make you grovel for it. You're not supposed to stay with your dad.
I really love her character.
Heike?
I love Heike, yeah.
Yeah, she's
I love
great.
how she's both like a badass and so emotionally fragile. Mm-hmm. Like in a way that really makes sense given the context. Because she bears up under extraordinary pain and abuse and like, social pressure at all times, while and it is that sort of thing that it's like, yes, the person in your life who deals with the most, of this external weight and thus appears very brave, also, like, if you add a feather to it, if you add the next touch of like disrespect will cause them to hide for the next several weeks, because it's a terrible way to live. And I think that Heike really captures that, and also like her particular brand of defensiveness next to Karis's particular brand of defensiveness, I think is a great, sort of study in ways to deal with having been abused.
Right, and the way that both of them understand how the other one got that way, and they kind of resent it, but like, Heike backstabs Karis in multiple ways, and Karis every time is like, well, I know how she got to be that way, and I feel partly responsible, even though I'm not entirely. So I'm just going to keep forgiving her, because I know how much it sucks to be in her situation.
Yeah, and it's like, again, it's a sort of a best available friend kind of situation, It's like we were the two people who understood how fucked up this was. And the thing that almost breaks that relationship is, or did we? It's that horrible, like, the bottom of your gut drops out feeling when it's like, oh no, you actually believe this, this thing that, we've both been sort of, we've mutually understood that it was awful, but in the end, you're going to be a true believer, and I'm not.
Right. And
oof,
yeah. And then, but, Heike gets her moment where she goes, actually, when it comes down to it, I'm going to side with my friend and not my abusive mother goddess. And in fact, yes. I'm going to stick my abusive mother goddess in a bottle and carry her around my neck, because she's my problem now. I have to, that's just A+ metaphor.
Yes, again.
Walking around with your abusive mother goddess in a bottle in your neck, so you have to constantly hear her belittle you, and you've still got access to her powers, but like, it's your responsibility and you can't inflict her on anyone else. It's so good.
Yeah, no, the core emotional metaphors in this book are great. It feels like the entire, system of the world was built around them in a really satisfying way, Yes,
and then on top of that, you get things like the transdimensional spider yacht, which is just great. Like,
which is just fun.
You get to watch the giant spider like phase into existence. And everyone is just like, yep, nope, this is our public transportation system. Let's all walk into the spider's mouth. And then it's super plush inside, and she gets really fancy dessert.
Yes, I'm glad that because the spider is like, to me at least, is the classic thing that we've run into a few times, where it's like, how are we so chill about air travel?
Right. Or
this
car
is
travel,
like,
for that matter.
Right. But like, this is in fact like walking into a giant spider. I'm glad for their sakes that this giant spider is more like a classic Zeppelin situation than an airplane. But
yeah, I've never been on an airplane that gave me fancy little tarts.
Yeah, it's more of an ocean liner slash Age of Blimps kind of dirigible situation. Yes, no, this book really likes to think about transport, which I appreciate. As somebody who also really likes to think about transport. I love the weird bulldogs.
Oh, yes, the weird, like, dogs that you ride around, but they have no head.
They look like a Tumblr post that I saw once and I'll probably never see again. Some form of la criatura. But also kind of like Sink Dog. Yes.
And they're just free public transit. And I love that there's times where you don't want to. There's totally the moment where she goes, no, I'm not going to take the bus. I'm going to take an Uber. But except that, it's a magical carriage instead of a giant headless dog, because, everyone can see you on the giant headless dog. And also the giant headless dog is a dog and might just jump in the harbor.
Right. Which is very captures the feeling of getting on a city bus. And
right.
Like, well, this will probably get me where I want to go.
Right. Like,
but, there's always the possibility. That...
And I really love this world because, again, it doesn't feel like, it doesn't map on one-to-one. It's not exactly steampunk technology. It's weirder than that. It's some parts of it feel very modern, or at least very 20th century, and some parts of it feel 19th century, and some parts of it feel quasi-medieval, or, Enlightenment. So, but it all seems to work. Mm. And part of that is that it's abstract enough. Most of this is either clearly there to work as a metaphor, or it's there to be cool. And you don't need it. And it definitely runs on vibes. I don't know how much of the geopolitical situation would really hold up if you poked it too hard, but honestly, that's fine. I want my metaphors to work more than I need.
Yeah, it feels perfectly reasonable, sort of fantasy Europe style geopolitical tensions to me, just as a general matter. I like that everything is pretty vague, but that the Reekers are French.
Yes.
That's just pleasant to me. I like that. But I wanted to talk about a part of the book that I liked less, or that I guess I didn't understand the heft of particularly.
All right, the grumpy zone.
Well, before we get to the grumpy zone, I like that there's a trans teenager in this book for no other reason than might as well make this character trans.
Well, but it worked. Also, though, it worked because the way I think it added some depth to her social insecurities. That she's not only the rural girl hanging out with like her cool city cousins, she's also trans. So there's sort of this extra level of precarity, which it makes her much more sympathetic when she's doing stupid teenager shit, like drugs.
Yes, no, I agree. It's not just because I suppose, but it's not a big deal. Does not have to be made out of it either, which I think is good. But I mentioned her because the part that I wanted to, if not complain about, then at least like wonder what was that about, was the part with the aurochs.
The elephants.
The golden elephants. And they're sniffing at her impurities and failing to give her their nature blessing. What the fuck was any of this about?
I mean, it's again, so the golden elephants they're one of the few remaining things, they're one of the remnants of the old gods. And so it's this moment where you go, oh, okay, they're the old god, the old god of Karis's village is awful, but maybe not all the Batuma are awful. Here's this beautiful, magical thing that's emotionally healing for, Heiki, and I'm blanking on the name of the academic girl. But that's
the academic girl has a name that I found weird and off-putting.
Well, she's from North Korea, so
and beyond that, I don't remember
it. North Korea is in the completely isolated, cut off, autarkic island. But so you have this moment that is genuinely healing, and they need it because of the stuff that Freyne has done to our academic girl, and is really meaningful. And it makes you go, oh, okay, some of this stuff is beautiful and good. And then Karis, who we know exactly why she's signed this compact at this point. And she's basically just told, okay, the fact that you've had to make this survival compromise you know, irrevocably tarnishes you, and you know, you are stained, and so you go, okay, as this is beautiful and magical for some people, and it's still really awful to people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, no, I think that that is that definitely sums it up.
And then the way that she, like, and she, being Karis, completely internalizes this, feels totally ashamed about it, thus doesn't tell anyone that that's what's going on. You know, she hides it so that her friend, you know, Heike, to make her feel better, buys her a little elephant statue to, you know, to be like, look, I love you. See, here's the magical elephants that we had so much fun with. Because Karis is so completely unable to admit, even though when the trans teenager from the elephant town finds out she's a death speaker, you know, Karis thinks that if she finds out she's a death speaker, she's going to get lynched in this town. But our teenager finds out, and she goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, I think that covers it. I think that I took that scene at face value, and I think the reason that I took that scene at face value was because while I was listening to it, I was driving through like this incredibly idyllic upstate New York, you know, little town delivering mail, and being like, "Oh, I'm not of this place."
Right, and
I just internalized Karis's feelings of rejection.
Right, but you know, the thing is, that's also the experience if you go to the idyllic, cute little town and everyone's super nice to you until they see you holding hands with your wife.
Right. Or see your bumper stickers.
Or, you know, like, and a part of what I enjoy, again, about the sort of way that none of these metaphors, there's always some extra complicated twist, is the idyllic small town that's rejecting Karis is actually does not seem to be, you know, is not persecuting their trans teenager, at least not that we're seeing.
Yes, although I think this is, again, a sort of product of the default bisexual universe that we're in, is that being transgender doesn't seem to be a huge deal here.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is that in this world that we live in, you go to the beautiful idyllic town and they find out you're trans, and you know, and that's your moment where everyone turns away. And in this case, right, you have in this case, being trans is fine. It's having made this survival pact with the new world order.
The trans teen is also the focus of a scene we didn't really talk about, which takes the form of an anti-drug homily, kind of, which seems kind of pedestrian until it's undercut later by our academic saving the day by getting zooted out of her mind on the same drugs. The drugs are the dead flesh of the old gods, and they let you do magic, which sounds like psychedelics, but in this context, I think it's actually more like Adderall. The old gods are made of speed. I feel entirely satisfied with that explanation. Thank you.
All right. I really liked that moment because it's such this moment of, oh, this feels so healing and so idyllic, and I'm so happy for them, and so you really feel Karis's rejection. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, thank you. I don't think that I'd fully processed that one. So this is like minorest of minor notes here. In the scene directly after the whole debacle with Feren's dad and the giant sucking machine, when Karis is waking up in bed having survived the whole ordeal, Feren grabs her a shirt, grabs her one of his ex-girlfriend's shirt or ex-fiance's shirts to wear and throws it at her. And every other time that Feren as the shadow interacts with the physical world, a deal is made of the drain that Karis feels. Like every time that he does it, we make sure to mention that Karis feels the physical drain. But in that particular instance, when he throws the shirt at her, mention is not made of the drain, which made me think that he had his body back in that moment.
Oh, I didn't notice that, but that's really interesting.
And I'm wondering if that is an on purpose fake out, where it's like we're going to let you wonder whether it's just Karis being tired and not noticing that he has his body back yet, or whether he's still a shadow.
Oh yeah, no, that works.
And I was like, this is I really enjoy the ambiguity that keeps that sort of goes through that scene as she eventually wakes up. But I did have another thing that I wanted to talk about. What do you make of her crying over Sebaster?
I was just about to raise that because it kind of makes sense, right? It's this it's this horrible exploitive relationship, but it is also what saved her. And
yes,
and then he dies, and it makes sense that she's mourning him, because suddenly she's spent the entire book being terrified of him. When he basically does the equivalent of texting her, on my way over, she runs, buys a bunch of red things, dumps a bucket of blood on her head, and then sits in her room waiting, terrified. It's a great, that's the first appearance of Sebaster is great. Everything about it's so creepy. And
this fucking pimp cane, pimp hat ass motherfucker coming to visit his girl.
Right. The way that he's like, the way that he croons, and like, it's just, and then the way that he shows up at the end with, or the time that it's revealed what he's going to do to her, he shows up with like his little audience of lesser gods just to ooh and ah over this atrocity that he's planning to commit to Karis, who is once again dripping with blood because he texted her that he's on his way, and
oh my god, it's so good.
It's so good, it's terrifying, but he saved her.
Yes, and I mean, he's sort of the sugar daddy, weirdly.
Yeah,
in
the
this
really
situation.
awful sugar daddy.
Yes, no, I mean, they're all awful, but
I know,
really
but like
sugar
really awful.
But like, I think that there is no doubt that in whatever angel machine logic way he could experience it, that he loved her.
Well, and she was his favorite.
Yes, but I think that. I mean, and it's not a love, whatever value of love that is, it's not one that you want aimed at you under any circumstances. But given that she grew up without a father who loved her, and that she has an incredibly hard time accepting that anybody else even likes her,
right,
let alone loves her.
This is the horribly, incredibly abusive relationship that she fled, that, got her out of her incredibly abusive home life. And so to me, it wasn't surprising at all that after he's been broken and he's dying, she's like, well, you did hold up your end of the bargain. It was a real bad bargain, but you did hold it up.
Yeah. And he is genuinely heartbroken that he can't do the horrible thing to her that he thinks that she's going to be honored by.
Right.
Enjoy.
I think that is also her moment of crying, is that she goes, oh, he really did love me, and it wasn't a love that I wanted, but like, this is, other than Farain, this is the first time that there's been a guy in her life who seemed to love her. I mean, there's her brother, but even her brother, well, we saw what happened with her brother.
We certainly did.
Including our introduction. We later find out that she and her brother were quite close. But our first introduction to her brother is him torturing a rat to death by drowning it.
Yes, there is a an undercurrent of terrifying potential violence in every man in this book. Even Farain,
absolutely. I mean, again, every time Farain even tries to protect her or interact with the world around her, he's like drawing her life force.
Right, and he really like the time when he gets really excited about trying to kill her brother.
Right, and makes it worse.
Exactly. No, I think this is one of those, it's one of those texts where it's like, I don't know if, and this is one of those, even eagle-eyed, misandry scout that I've been forced into becoming by this podcast. Like, even I am sort of like, isn't it a part of being in a world where men are and being attracted to men that you do in fact have to allow for the potential of violence in people who you look to for love or for support or for protection.
Yeah. And
And I don't,
especially because this
and
book makes it clear that when you put women in power, they're just as bad. It's just that this is another world where men have more institutional power, and thus there's always that threat.
yeah, yeah, no, I think that it's making that observation, but I think it's an entirely fair observation to make.
And it's not, and it doesn't feel like it's being bioessentialist about it. It's about power.
He doesn't even have a body for most of the book.
Right.
And God knows what's going on with Sebaster's body, but it is very clear, and she makes a point when somebody questions this, that Sebaster is in fact male.
Right.
His third mouth with its drooling, notwithstanding, or rather as sort of a supporting fact to that assertion.
Yes. And also the other thing about the ending is that in case you missed the idea that both sides bad when it comes to the old and new gods, I think that watching Sebaster get brutally broken while he's still trying to do by his lights the right thing, even though what is by his lights the right thing is the most horrific thing in the book, in a book full of weird horror.
Yes.
So, and but also he gets just horribly, brutally broken, and the new gods, the new god possesses Ferain. Like, that's the thing that takes Ferain away from her after she's done so much to keep him alive and with her.
I have to say that if there is a sequel and that we do get to spend time with the beautiful, cruel god occupying Ferain's body, there's going to be fic. It's there are tropes upon tropes to be to be dealing with.
Oh yeah. All right.
I think that this is a very good book.
This is a very good book. Yeah. This is one of those books that I enjoyed, and the process of talking about it has made me like and respect it more. So this absolutely deserves its Nebula nomination, and if it does
of
win,
the options, I encourage you to vote for this one.
Yes, absolutely.
Or Rakesfall. But I don't think Vajra needs it as much at this point.
And I encourage you to either pay actual money for it or convince your local library to pay actual money for it, because I would like to read a sequel, and also I feel like the author has earned it. And also you should just read this book. It's good.
It's good. And we will wrap it up.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.